So, welcome all to day two, crafting your career selling point. And you'll see exactly what that means in terms of your resume and LinkedIn profile as we get further into the presentation. Oops, two more in the waiting room. Hold on, give me a second. Um, and looks there's nobody else. Okay, I guess we're good to go. All right. And this is all about making sure that we communicate everything about you in the best possible way. All right. But before we get to that, we want to cover a few things related to last night's quote unquote homework. Anybody want to share what came up for you as it relates to your purpose, your mission, your objective, and the things you're grateful for?
We're also excited to share.
I can see that. I can see that.
Well, my mission pretty much has been the same for the last few years. I still have this great desire to complete the books that I'm doing and shoot for the movie and the TV specials
Mhm.
I've been aiming for the last 5 to 10 years. So that's the overarching dream of mine. The reality is I might have to go back to teaching in the public schools to help supplement my income until these can become a reality, God willing.
Understood and heard loud and clear. Those kinds of quests, I'll call them, can be very, very difficult. Lots of ups and downs. I'm not telling you anything you don't already know.
Right.
I guess the only question that I have is there are 168 hours in a week. You're going to sleep 56, 64 of them, whatever amount you're going to. There are probably 70, maybe 80 useful hours that aren't related to taking a shower, cooking a meal, and doing all this other kind of stuff. When you go back into teaching, unless it's substitute teaching, that takes 50 to 60 hours a week based on everybody that
Yes.
I've ever spoken with.
Yes, I
So,
agree.
and I'm not, this is not a question of, well, should you do this? Should you not? And not at all. It's more of
Yeah.
a managing expectations question. And as you go back into the marketplace for whatever teaching role that may fit,
Hmm.
what level of commitment time-wise will that take away from your quest to do all the things you just mentioned a minute ago?
Right. And, I wrestled with that with the first 5 years of writing. I was still teaching as I was writing my first book.
Hmm.
And I was plunging myself into an hour to 2 hours a night, going into midnight or 1 in the morning, and then getting up at 6 and teaching the next day.
Right.
So, of course, I was 10 to 15 years younger than I am now when I was doing that. So that was a little more doable. But everything you said is well taken. I have wrestled with this myself for the last several years. Um, but I'm just letting you know that's really where I am.
And that's great. And you bring a unique perspective to any kind of history teaching that may happen, particularly if it happens to be World War II.
Right.
Okay, you probably know more than the entire teaching population in the state of New Jersey. And on certain aspects of World War II,
Yes.
just because
Right.
you've been immersed so deep into that. There's
Right.
another question, and this is an offline question. Is your knowledge or your ability to translate what you've learned in the last 10, 12, 15 years, whatever it is, does it create a situation where you could be a kind of consultant to other school districts, to colleges, universities, or things like that? Just what's coming up for me is because anytime somebody has a very narrow niche, but a
Yeah.
deep, deep knowledge of that niche, that can be way more valuable than a broad scale, general background
Right.
in any particular subject. I'll leave that as a point of consideration. If you want to answer now, great. Just a thought.
Yeah, no, I'd like to think about how I'd like to respond to that. I have a couple thoughts, but yeah, maybe we could revisit that later.
Okay.
Thank you.
But then, and points of gratitude, Scott, since you're since you're up on the barrel, as they say.
Yeah. Yeah, well, first of all, I'm very thankful for my faith in God and Jesus Christ, because through good times and bad times, it has ultimately been my faith that has sustained me through all of this, especially through the trials and tribulations of, I'll say, the last 5 to 8 years, which have really had their ups and downs. And of course, I'm thankful to God for my parents who raised me not only in the faith, but in a warm and loving home.
Mhm.
And that really provided such a good foundation for me in so many areas of life, including hearing my father's stories growing up. Um, Both parents making sure that I had a good moral foundation through my faith and their example. Um, those are a couple of the biggest things. I don't know if you want me to go through the whole list, but those are definitely the outstanding ones.
Those certainly jump to the top. And just for the sake of time, and we may have more time here in a minute, we'll see who wants to share or not, but those are top of the list for
Right,
many people. And ironically enough, not top of the list for a lot of people as well. I mean, the bottom line is the more you're grateful for whatever it is that's been going on around you, whatever blessings you've received in however context that you interpret those,
right,
that attitude, it's kind of like a boomerang. You send it out and it comes back to you.
right.
And this is scientifically proven stuff. I'm not making this up, but that whole 21 days reframe or rewire your mind by just focusing on three things that you have gratitude for. I
Mm.
have a whole page. I mean, I had to type it out and I read it regularly and I say, oh, that I forgot about that, and I just things I'm
Yeah.
grateful for. There are about 75 items on it, divided into different, anyway,
Well,
that
it's
doesn't
funny you
matter.
say that, because I did the same exercise during the pandemic back in 2020 when
Hmm.
I had quiet time in the chapel. I just wrote down a whole list of like 2 pages, very similar to what you just said. And it really began to change my outlook on life. So your points are well taken.
Okay. Anybody else want to pick up on that, either from a gratitude standpoint or purpose, mission, objective standpoint?
I wanted to share, but I don't know if like mine is as in depth. Um, with me being young, I do know and understand that there's a possibility of like my desires or career changing, and um, but I wrote down for dreams for my life, I'm sure we all feel the same way. I put, I want to have a career and job that actually is fulfilling and enjoying, financially stability or financially free, just so I can like spend time with my family and actually like spend my life doing the things that I desire to do and not like just a simple getting by, and then for my purpose, I don't know necessarily, and I don't know my mission or objective necessarily either. So I just said, I want to live in the mission that of the reason why I'm here, that God put me on this earth, and just simply getting paid and getting what I deserve out of it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's pretty simple.
Well, this is for you and Scott, but the whole first section of my book, Finding God's True Purpose for Your Career, goes into these types of exercises in great detail. Even if it's not clear to you right now, I have 7 exercises. Some of them I've borrowed with permission. Some of them I've kind of put together through other sources, and some of them I've made up. And the combination of those on the other side usually says, you know what, this is a bullseye for me. And there are other diagnostics and Myers-Briggs and DISC and all that kind of stuff. We'll get into that, but um, personality assessments that will align with careers that would be a quote unquote better fit based on the experiences of tens of thousands of people before you. Okay, so this is territory that I cover every day. I started doing this work for myself back in the 2000s. And then when I started doing career coaching, I realized I had a platform because I had done the work. And it really becomes more meaningful the more iterations you take as you go along. And like even right away, it can be a little bit daunting to say some of the things that we were talking about yesterday. That said, if you never ask the question, if you never prompt yourself for the question, you're never going to get an answer that's going to move you from where you are right now. Okay. So even Imani, even they say, well, it's not as detailed and not as deep and all that. Okay. Um, that's fine for right now, but at least it got you thinking, what am I looking for? You know, financial freedom, doing a job that I don't just have to report into, and a few other things that you set up there, which basically say it's a filter for what you don't want as much as it is for what you do want. Okay. So just hold on to that thought. I mean, all of this stuff, like I said, is very iterative, and it will, as you let your mind as it sinks into your mind, as you let yourself peruse on it and meditate on it and say, what would really work? And you're prompted with the right questions, which again are the whole first section of my book. Then you start to get some answers that you wouldn't have even thought of if you hadn't asked those questions or you weren't asked those questions.
Right.
So, okay, who's next?
I'll go next.
Okay.
And I have to say, actually, this morning I went to a meeting that was supposed to be at 10 o'clock, and there were two other people there with me. And we
Mhm.
waited around and waited around, and it turns out that the meeting had been changed to this past Saturday. But I'm sensing a theme here in my life.
Well, I'll take the hit for last night. I can't take the hit for what you just said. Okay,
But I
so
mean, again, somebody put it on Facebook, but didn't think to send an email to everybody as well. So anyway, um, so I enjoyed the gratitude, and we're in a position in life right now that, I mean, one of the things I'm grateful for is free time.
mhm.
And so I can't say that I'm anxious to go back to work, but I also recognize the fact that I fritter away time on useless endeavors. And
Okay.
so maybe a job would be a wise thing. Um, so I'm just at a place right now where I feel so blessed. And like Scott, my faith, was the first thing really on the list
Mhm.
that I'm grateful for, and that informs my decision making. And so I pray about what doors are going to open as I considered what my next step is. I've had a number of careers. The most recent, most serious one was teaching college ESL.
Mhm.
But then I was in a Wild Birds Unlimited selling bird food, and birding is one of my hobbies, so that was a wonderful fit, and a lot of fun. But I think for me, it's really more the desire to have flexibility in a job more
Okay.
than what I'm doing necessarily. I would just like to have flexibility with my hours. Um, I'll work very hard. I'm responsible, hardworking, organized, and I think I'd be a great fit in many places, but I would like to be able to take time off to travel when I want to take time off to travel.
And
Um,
and you also show up for meetings on time that don't exist, which is a good trait too. So, um, but in all seriousness, you are not the only person that has had multiple careers. Okay. And one of the reasons that we're doing the work tonight is putting an umbrella over all of those different, could be perceived as being completely opposite of each other. I mean, teaching ESL and having a job at a birding store, a bird store, a bird feed store, could be perceived as being completely like out of context. Like, well, what do you make out of this? And this is something that I've done for many, many years, is take very disparate parts of people's either personality, skills, experience, accomplishments, and turn them into a cohesive story that's of value to the types of individuals or companies or organizations that you want to be part of. Okay, so none of this from what you're saying, and I'm saying this to everybody, not just to you, Doris, is a liability. Like every part of your background, especially when there are things that you can hang your hat on as it relates to accomplishments, none of these are liabilities. These are all assets. It's just a matter of how the asset's positioned and how it's then delivered to the appropriate target audience, which we'll get into tonight and tomorrow night. Okay. So, Nicole, I know you may have some noise in the background there too, so you're on mute. Dorothy, would
Oh,
you,
oh,
or either Dorothy or Nicole, go ahead.
Dorothy, you go first because I'm like 2
Okay.
minutes from my house.
Oh, okay. Um, as for being grateful, um, I'm grateful for my health. I'm grateful for um, still having my children and my grandchildren in my life, and my furry children in my life.
Hmm.
Um, I've been doing the same job for far too long, for 40 years, and I'm getting burnt out, and um, it's not what I wanted to do when I was younger.
How
But
did you quote unquote fall into it? What was your entry?
um, to make an extremely long story really short, I started out as a real estate salesperson
Okay.
back in the early 1980s. I had carded this guy before phones, before computers, before tasers, any of that stuff. I carted this guy around in my car for 3 weeks, and he finally decided on a house that he wanted to make an offer on. And it was odd that the only thing that he wanted to see was vacant houses, but he had a good cover story for why he just wanted to look at vacant houses.
Hmm.
Wasn't a truthful one, but you know, he was being transferred and he needed a house that they might, that somebody would be willing to let him and his family occupy before closing, so that he could bring his family down here. The short part of that is that he had already killed 3 female realtors between North Carolina and Florida, and I was target number 4.
Wow.
So my husband and I got into, when this guy decided on a contract. He said, but I can't meet you until 9 o'clock because I don't get off work until, I can't get there from work until about 9 o'clock, but I'll meet you there. It's a vacant house in a neighborhood, but in a neighborhood, a family neighborhood. So everybody's kids were in bed and nobody was out on the streets at 9 o'clock at night.
Right.
My husband said, you're not going by yourself. And I was a cocky 25-year-old. And I said, yes, I am. And he went out and took the coil wire off of my car. So I couldn't, back in the old days when they had coil wires. And so he went with me. The guy showed up. And when I opened the door of our van to get out of the door, the cargo light came on inside. And the guy saw my husband sitting there and took off. Never to be heard from again. The next day, because all of this stuff about the female realtors who were dead didn't come until on a Friday, when the board of realtors would send out all the newsletters and all the, be on the lookout for, and, be careful of this. And that morning, in the envelope that we got from the Pompano Beach Board of Realtors, was a complete history of what this man had done, this person had done, and everything that they had in this flyer was everything that I had been through with this guy for the last 3 weeks.
Wow.
And so I looked at my broker and I said, that's it, I'm done. I said, that's as close as I want to come to, I'm done. And her husband happened to work in the office right adjoining our office. And he was a commercial appraiser. And he walked out and he said to me, he said, Dorothy, what's the matter? And because he had been listening, I said, I'm done. I said, I'm going to take what little bit of stuff I have on this desk here and I'm out. And he looked at me and said, you put in a lot of time and a lot of effort to get that license. I said, yeah, but I don't want to be dead.
Right.
So he said, come with me. I'm going to teach you how to do what I do. And I said, Mr. Pierce, what is it that you do? He said, I'm a commercial appraiser, but I'm going to teach you to be a residential appraiser.
Okay.
And 40 years later, I'm still a residential appraiser.
So two thoughts that come up as you're saying this. Number one is good thing your husband stuck to his guns.
He was much bigger than me. He was a former Marine.
Well, his instincts were clearly
Right on.
in the
Yeah.
right spot. Number one. Number two, that we're going to have to coach you when you're interviewing to make your responses laser and focused.
Yeah,
Okay. And I say this as somebody who, this is what I do every week.
yeah,
So it's a good story, but it needs to be cut by about 2/3.
yeah,
Okay. So
yeah.
I'm not throwing stones here. This
No,
is,
no, I agree. It's 40 years later and it still gets to me, so
well,
I tend to go on. But I agree, I talk too much sometimes.
well, I mean, there are ways to get to the story in a laser fashion so
Yeah,
that you get the point across without having the length of time that goes, that you just did. But
yeah,
that's a separate conversation entirely. That'll be for day 4.
good.
Okay, Nicole, are you do you happen to be home or are you still in the car? Oh,
Nope,
there you are.
I am home
Okay.
by the skin of my teeth. Okay. Um,
I
um, I put mine together. I'm just pulling it up.
Okay.
Um, I kind of I kind of relate to Imani's story.
Mm-hmm.
Because I I feel like for my dreams, I don't think I ever really had solid career dreams. I think my dreams were always very simple. I wanted to have a family. I wanted to have children.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and but I also knew that the right thing to do was get a job and be independent. So I've always lacked confidence. So I always kind of just do what I think the right thing is to do, whether it's something I'm happy with or not. So I just kind of go through the motions of going to college and picking a career that sounds like it will provide financial stability and also, something that I somewhat like. So
Mm-hmm.
I those were always really my dreams, and I'm extremely grateful for my healthy children. I'm grateful that I am in a place right now in my life where I am financially okay.
And
Um,
how old are your kids again?
so I have an 11-year-old, I'm sorry, a 9-year-old and a 14-year-old. My God,
Okay.
my brain's
You'll
like
you
5 years ago.
That's okay. You'll know you've arrived as a parent when you're negotiating for your own car keys with your 14-year-old, just as a point of reference. Okay. So
Oh God.
just managing expectations. So go ahead.
But I graduated college. Any job you try to get out of college in marketing usually ends up being sales. So I hustled in my early 20s, just trying to get my foot in the door anywhere where I could at least feel like I could hang my hat there for a
Mm-hmm.
while. And I ended up finding a role that was within the marketing realm, but not sales.
Mm-hmm.
And I met the most influential boss that I've ever had in my life.
In a good way, I
And
assume, or
in a very good way.
okay.
I loved working with her. I loved the team that we built. And as I was there for about 11 years, and I kept doing whatever was coming my way. I'm like, yes, I will do it. Yes, I will learn that. Yes, I will try that. I was just kind of absorbing anything and everything. Um, and as I was enjoying this job and having all of these promotions and liking the people that I worked with, I found that the travel was pretty strenuous and it was
Sure.
taking me away from the one thing that I knew I wanted and the one thing that I could have, that I did have. And I ended up, blessing in disguise, getting eliminated from that position. But I got eliminated after my amazing boss, CMO, she left the company. And
Mm-hmm.
when she left the company, I think I kind of felt a little lost. Um, to me, I enjoyed working for her. I didn't necessarily enjoy working for the company, and I really didn't care what industry I was in, and I really didn't have much of a passion more than leading a team and collaborating with smart people, and I enjoyed that component of it, but I didn't know, I felt like I was the master. I was the jack of all trades, but the master of none. I'm blowing that analogy, whatever it
Mm-hmm.
is. Um, because I just spread myself everywhere. I learned a little bit of everything, and I kind of absorbed so much. So when I was let go from that position, I was lost because I kind of felt like the skills that I had obtained wouldn't transfer or translate outside of where I was. It was so niche in the HR and staffing world that
Mm-hmm.
trying to um, trying to show how that transitions well into another industry was not something I even knew where to start. I met with some coaches, I talked with people, I started seeking, counseling just to help me figure out what it is I was looking for. So at the end, I feel like I picked another job that I don't know. I guess it's the right move, and they're hiring, and COVID's right around the corner, so I should make this decision. And I was in that position, and I was there for 5 years, and it was one of those things where I didn't enjoy who I was working with. I didn't enjoy the job. I didn't enjoy the way that I felt when I would leave work and not have any energy or patience or anything to deal with my kids outside of carting them to which sport they had to go to next.
Right.
And when I got let go back in just literally 3 weeks ago, it was like this cloud lifted, and it's this flexibility that has been never there. All of a sudden now it's there, and it's all my eggs are now in one basket, and it's my kids. and
Mm-hmm.
and I know I have to go and find another position, and that's definitely something I'm working on and I want to do. But this idea of what is my purpose and my mission, it seems so simple when I talk about it just being, you know, something, to have a position where I feel like I am contributing to something great, but I'm also able to handle this work-life balance so I don't just throw myself into work or throw myself into not work with my kids.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm struggling to tell my story, really, like whenever I get asked in interviews, so tell me a little bit about yourself and what you're looking for. That's been the most difficult thing for me to like come up with. So it's like I try to come up with things that sound good, but I think that's just where I am. But I do want to be, my objective is to have a position where I enjoy the people I'm with. I feel stable in the fact that I can hang my hat there, and I enjoy the work, and I'm helping others, and I have the balance, and I'm able financially to plan.
Okay. And there's a lot that came up as you were talking about your experiences, your background, your should have or need to do, and all this other kind of stuff. But the one thing that sticks out for me is that the day you got laid off, it was like a cloud was lifted because you deserve better than the things that you have, quote unquote, fallen into. And you've created a skill set that, candidly, you're not alone in this, you're underestimating the value of. And the kinds of things that you can do to make a real difference from a revenue standpoint, from a profitability standpoint, from a lead generation standpoint, with large, medium, or small organizations is substantive. I mean, I've seen your resume. We've had this conversation, but there's an emotional component that goes along with your energy being drained for so long, and you feel like you've compromised your family life or your hobbies or just your own self by being in an environment that probably would be best described as toxic. And this is the time. Okay, like tell me about yourself is one of the key questions we're going to talk about on day 4. But if you haven't done this work like yesterday and today, and really clarified it in your own mind, it's really hard to get somebody on the other side of the desk or the other end of a Zoom call to say, okay, I get why she's here and I understand what she's looking for and what she can do for us. All right. So all of this kind of sifting through what your background has been, what your skills have been, your accomplishments, and all those things that are meaningful to future employers or clients if you wanted to be a consultant, which with your background in this digital age is a very viable option as well. All of that comes up, but it has to be delivered clearly in a compelling way and concisely so that people get an understanding of again, what your mission purpose are and how is it going to make a difference for them. Okay, so thanks for putting a lot of that out there because there are many people, myself included, and in all the jobs that I've had, there are probably 25% of them where I would say I'd go back and do it again. From the standpoint of what did I feel like energetically when I was getting up in the morning to go to work, when I was there, and when I was driving home or wherever I was, however the commute happened to be, which is not enough, unfortunately. But there are good organizations out there, and when you have the skill set like you have, um, your options are broader than what you are believing at this moment that they are. Okay?
Yep.
All right. So for all of you, thanks for and not so much thanks to me or from me, but thank yourself for taking the time to do whatever amount of time you spent on this work. And I go into much greater detail individually when I'm working with clients. But for the purposes of these 5 days, this is a good start. So with that said, I'm going to move on. What are your dreams? Examine all areas of your life. And one of my big mantras is career is just a part of your life. Okay. When you're in your 20s, it's like career and finances, that's it. You want to make your mark out there. And you're looking at somebody who had the same mindset at that point in my life. And where are you in each of these? What have you done to make them real? How does your career or vocation fit these dreams, short, medium, and long-term goals? Imani, you talked about things that you want to do outside of work, and how does your career align with that? Does it align with your core values? And it must be meaningful, not just to you, but those who are around you. I can't tell you how many times I came home from work after a ridiculously long day, or my wife did the same thing, and we just had some stupid stuff happen. And you quote unquote take it out on the rest of your life. And that includes the other people around you as well. And that's not a healthy thing. I don't do it now because I'm in a situation that lines up with my values and it is meaningful to me and those near me. But for a long time, that wasn't the case. So dreams, as I describe them, and this is in much greater detail in my book, is a function of all of these 14 categories. And like I said a minute ago, most people focus on the professional and financial. We call it professional or career. But all of these areas of your life have an impact. And some of them more than others, depending on the individual. But what I've asked people to do in the exercises, and this will not be your homework for tonight. Okay, this really is actually too much involved here. Create as many goals, dreams, or objectives as you can in each of these areas. And this is directly taken from, with permission, by a book called The Dream Manager by Matthew Kelly. It's a very interesting story. Of all things, he is a very popular author in organizational development. And he's also a very popular author as a layperson in the Catholic Church. And his books are all over the world, actually. And he's originally from Australia. But he had a very fundamental breakthrough with this book in terms of prompting the person who is reading it to say, what are your dreams in these different categories? Another way of assessing a quote unquote right fit for you is a Myers-Briggs. There's a website out there that's a shortened version of the Myers-Briggs. It's called 16personalities.com, 16personalities.com. For all of $9, you can get a personality assessment, which is about a 60-page report, and it will demonstrate not just what you're all about, but how you interact with others who are different than you. and it will bring to the surface the types of occupations that are a good fit. And the Myers-Briggs has been done by several million people. I don't know what the exact number is. 16 personalities, again, is a shortened version of it, but it'll take you about 15 minutes to do. A lot of clients that I'm working with have done it and they say, oh, I didn't realize that. And self-assessment is so important as it relates to job search, because if you aren't in a position where you're telling people why you are like, why you want to be in a certain role, because you have a personality fit, because your skill sets align with it, all this other kind of stuff, this is another way to back up your claims that you're the right person for a particular job. I've taken the Myers-Briggs 3 times. I took it in 87, 2003, and again in 21. And it was consistent the second 2 times. It changed from the first. But either way, it was a good indicator of the types of career-related roles that I would be a fit for. DISC is another diagnostic. There are several others, but these are the most popular. And DISC stands for dominant, influential, steady, and conscientious. It's typically used in the workplace where teams will do these assessments, DISC particularly. And not only do you find out about you, but you find out about working with Johnny down the hall, who is steady and conscientious when you're dominant and influential, and you're going to clash. There's no way around it. You're going to clash. But an understanding of how to properly, quote unquote, communicate with and work with others who are different than you are is a huge step forward toward organizational growth, and also having teams meet deadlines, do projects on time and under budget, and make things really work. All right. When there's an understanding of, hey, there's no right or wrong answer to this, it's just the way Johnny or Sue are all about, and working with that is going to be a benefit all the way around. So the more you know about yourself, the easier it is to not only communicate that to a hiring manager or a recruiter, but also when you get on the job to work with other people as well. I'm going to go through just a quick version of the psychological stages of grief, loss, and revival. Number one is this. On the scale of emotional disruptors in anyone's life, number one is the death of a spouse. Number 2.5, because there are different surveys, is loss of a job. And it usually goes through the following stages: shock, denial, fear, anger, depression. You finally bargain with it, and then you accept where you are and say, okay, this is a new day. In 12 years almost of doing this work, I've gotten 3 phone calls from people who were let go or laid off or whatever happened to them that went something like this: I just got laid off, meaning they were happy about it. Everybody else goes through some level of these stages. And my goal, personally, my goal when I'm working with anybody is to make sure that these stages are as brief as possible. You have to go through them, but make them brief, because ultimately it's a new chapter. It's a new canvas. You can paint with new paintbrushes, new colors, new everything else. And getting to that acceptance and enthusiasm for what's coming next is really, really important. Okay, so let's get to your value proposition, which is actually the subject for tonight. And I'm not sure how far we are. Actually, we're 40 minutes in, and we're just getting to the subject area for tonight. So we're going to go a little over the hour here. Just bear with me, but I think it was well worth it to have everybody share what the homework was all about. The most important things as it relates to your value proposition are defining what your skills, needs, interests, and values are all about. Those are some other exercises that I have in my book. The second thing is to determine what you've accomplished so far. And the way to do that is, and I'm going to go into this in more detail, is to quantify the impact of everything that you've done as best you can. Then matching these preferences with whatever realistic position is out there is going to make sure that you identify how you relate to these specific roles. We're going to get into some accomplishment related work here, and that's going to be some of that's going to be the homework tonight. Okay, several different options in the working world. I've combined as many of them as I can here, but there are more that I've missed, I'm sure. For-profit businesses, and again, this is all in my book. Large corporations and firms, small to medium-sized companies, consulting or coaching, starting your own business, And then healthcare, legal or regulatory, and entertainment. I've done the first five. I have not done legal or regulatory, and I'm not a doctor and I don't play one on TV. So that means entertainment is out. But just put yourself in the category of, after you've done the self-assessment of where do you fit, or what are you, or who are you, where does it fit in the working world, right? Government, public sector, some people absolutely love government positions. I'd probably pull my eyes out. I mean, I would get very, very frustrated with hierarchies and all the political back and forth and everything that goes along with it. I know a lot of people who are first responders who love the work, absolutely love the work. Physically, it can get, draining at a certain age. Education, we've talked to some of you been in education at certain levels, college, university, community colleges, high school, etc., and nonprofit. That has come up a couple times in terms of what some of you might be interested in doing going forward. Again, I'm only putting this out there to say, once you've done the inner work, how do you align that with what's available in the outside world? Okay, as you know, my simplified baseball field analogy for job search, we are getting to first base tonight, and we'll get there before it'll be a little after 9 o'clock, but we'll get there. Written objectives are critical, and they can change. But this is a direct lift of a client that I worked with a few years ago. And it goes like this. You want to outline as best you can the type of position you're looking for, the type of organization or industry that you want to work with. It used to be that where is really important. Now it's much less because everybody's used to working remotely. And what kind of compensation are you looking for? There's also some situations where people want to put in their working environment. Like, for instance, I want to be outside 3 days a week. Okay. And I've had clients who have said some version of that, maybe not 3 full days, but what the goal is here by creating an objective is to keep you focused and prevent you from going off the rails. Because you could get on to LinkedIn and any of the job boards, Indeed, monster.com or anything. You could get on there and find 2, 3, 500 jobs that you might be able to do. But if you don't have this filter as part of your process of going through all of those applications, you could spend a lot of time and waste it by applying for these. Because we'll find out tomorrow that the response rate for applying online blindly is somewhere between 1/2 and 1%. So that's like 1 out of 100, 1 out of 200. It's like buying a lottery ticket. Unless you know somebody in the organization who can get your credentials to the top of the pile. I've seen hundreds and even thousands of people apply for a given job on LinkedIn and on the job boards in a matter of days. And you're just going to get lost in the shuffle. Okay. Everybody thinks that when you apply online, you click this, you click that, you can apply for 15 jobs in 10 minutes on LinkedIn, but you haven't really done anything until you're on the top of the pile electronically or paper with the hiring manager or the recruiter. If you're pursuing a passion, okay, and Scott, you certainly talked about that, and you've been doing that for the last several years. Is that still small voice loud enough to carry you through the financial circumstances that you've described that you're facing? If you do have a passion and you haven't listened to that still small voice, let's figure out a way to monetize it. Several years ago, the guy that brought me into career development coaching, his name is Henry Lesher. He looked at me and he said, "You know what this means?" And he wrote it down on a napkin, ICNU. And no. And he said, "What it means is I see in you that you're going to make a huge difference in this particular field, and you're going to do things that haven't been done before." And I'm like, "Oh, okay. Sounds good to
Hmm.
me."
Hmm.
When people are saying to you, people are coming to you for advice about certain subject areas or about certain areas of expertise that you may have, they see in you things that you may take for granted. Who says it to you and does it resonate? And that's a question that I'm going to have you answer some of it in the homework tonight. What do people come to you about? Because they know you can either solve the problem or you have information that they don't. And we talked about this yesterday. Should you reinvent yourself in whatever way that might mean? Okay, there are studies that say recent college graduates will have 6 careers before they retire, not 6 jobs. And if you're in an industry that is, let's just say, dated, when I first moved to New Jersey in the 80s, pharmaceuticals and telecom were all the rage. And then by the late 90s, things started to consolidate, layoffs, et cetera. And I write buggy whips in here because I don't think any of you have seen a buggy whip salesman, and they've gone the way of the dinosaur 100 years ago when Henry Ford had the Model A and the Model T. So contrast this with growing industries like web developers, social media experts, construction and contractors. Trades are hugely important these days because there have been a whole half a generation of people who have gone to school for various degrees and things like plumbing, electrician, drywall, all this kind of stuff that everybody takes for granted. You don't have to spend a college education to do that, and you can make a lot of money. And there are people who are multimillionaires who started out in the trades and then they started their own business at certain levels. In 12 years of doing this work, I've seen one web developer because there's so much work to be done. And if they're good and they keep current with their skill sets, they're going to have work for as long as they need to. And how many of you have a plan B? All right. And a plan B, like there are many different options for this, but what it comes down to is your plan A is your primary source of income. Let's call it your 9 to 5. A plan B can be any number of different options. Could be a multi-level marketing company, could be a real estate business on the side. It could be, and I have friends who do this, who have online stores. I have other friends who do consulting on the side. I've done various projects at different times or places. A lot of these options, if properly planned out and executed, can become your plan A. And there's a lot of, let's just say, downside and bad reputation with multi-level marketing companies, but the ones that have stood the test of time, and I know probably 15 of them off the top of my head, 3 of them I have direct contacts with and I can put you in touch with, where after a period of 2, 3, or 5 years, you can start to make substantial income. You know, we're talking 10, 20, 30, $50,000 a year or more. And I know several multimillionaires who have done it in that way. So realize the average employment is about 2.8 years. 20 years ago it was around 4 years. So temp or part-time is becoming the norm. So all of these income sources, and if you read Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad, he goes into great detail about all of this, where you can use your skills to turn them into assets, which turn into income producing assets, and not just assets like a boat, which are going to be, you know, taking up more of your time, energy, and effort, even though they're an asset, but they're not an income producing asset. And all of these can become a plan A. My son already has 2 Airbnbs. He's 33. His goal is to get 15, and by his calculation, that would make it so that he wouldn't have to work anymore. Okay, your value proposition. And I'm shifting gears here, but I just wanted, again, from a direction standpoint, I want to put all the rest of that stuff on the table. What recruiters and hiring managers don't want to see on a resume or to talk about in an interview are your duties, responsibilities, and activities. I have people who say things like, and there's probably 70% of the resumes I see are filled with these, where managed group between finance and marketing to determine optimal cost structures. Okay, that sounds good, but it doesn't say what the impact is. So duties, responsibilities, and activities, you could also add breathed oxygen and use the restroom. So it's really important to put things that are these accomplishments, contributions, your skills and assets, and the ways you've added value. And the best way to do that is to quantify things in the best way that you can. And I'm going to get into a couple examples here in a minute. Something like, and this is almost a direct lift from a resume I did recently. Grew sales annually for 3 consecutive years between 10 and 25% in a saturated territory. If somebody can make a huge difference like that in a territory with a lot of competition, that person is going to get to the top of the list in terms of people that I'm interested in talking about related to another sales position. Does your value proposition make you any of these? In all my marketing days, and I'm summarizing this, we used to do market research studies to determine the viability of either a concept or an actual product. Sometimes we'd have in-home use tests. Other times we just have a paragraph describing what the product or service is all about. And ultimately, I boiled it down to these. If the product or service was or is unique, compelling, ownable, valuable, and affordable, you're going to win. In fact, if you have 4 out of 5 of these, you're going to win. So all of you have something unique about you, but it may not be ownable. The goal is to turn everything that you've done into a compelling story so that it's valuable. Then people want to know that you're affordable. Rule of thumb is that you need to be paid about a third of what your actual value is. Okay, so a third of it goes to your salary, a third of it goes to the cost of goods or whatever it might be, and the other third of it goes to making further investments in the company. But what I'm saying is, if you're in a sales role and you bring in $10 million and your salary is, let's say, 200,000, okay, the net of all of that, like the gross profit on that has to be 600,000 to pay you. All right. I'm using very, very round numbers, but those are things that you can count on as it relates to how compelling is your value proposition. So what are your skills? All right. I pulled this off the internet a little while ago. This is Ms. Interviewer, and the interviewee is going to demonstrate the following skills, which are not going to be all of that relevant to the new position. Okay, so it's kind of cute, actually, a nice party trick, but not of your laughing, so I may have to remove this another time. But anyway, I'm giving you an example here of the top of a resume that has a positioning statement and titles that are very compelling. This is somebody I worked with 3 years ago when he was in the middle of, he had just finished up his graduate degree in accounting, and he had had some really good internships. The ways you can add value, I'm going to get into this more later, but you can help grow revenue, you can help cut costs, you can solve big problems, prevent big problems, or you can put teams together of internal and external staff to handle the first 4. He had tremendous cost cutting and problem solving, or let's just say problem preventing examples in his resume, but it wasn't being shown. I'm showing you just really at the top here, which basically says these are the kind of titles that he was really interested in. And a short and sweet summary of what he's all about, and then the key skill sets. If you put your resume in this format, you're going to be in far better shape. Now, he's a recent college graduate, a recent grad school graduate, and every college resume that I see, except for maybe 2 schools around the country, they start with your name and then they list education and all the relevant coursework. That's nice to know, but it doesn't describe what your real value is or your value proposition is all about. Okay, so again, just the top of a resume that I worked on, and no comments about my ability to use the red markers in Word. So anyway, the resume must be highlight accomplishments, contributions, and how you added value, must be clear, compelling, and concise. The longest resume I ever saw before I chopped it up and made it a real resume, it was really more of a CV than a resume, was 7 pages. And the person who gave it to me said, "Oh, this is my resume." I said, "No, it's not. It's your CV." Curriculum vitae is a whole different thing, particularly if you're in academia or you have publications or you have other industry expertise that matters, patents and things like that. A resume is a page or 2. Sometimes I'll go a little over 2 pages, but 2 pages is generally it. I could spend a whole hour and more on LinkedIn, but I'm just going to say this. It is a partner to your resume, and it's personalized and less formal, particularly the about section. That is, you can put personal things in there that you can't really on a resume, still must highlight your unique value and align with your other social media. The big thing about LinkedIn is that if you handle it right and you put the right keyword phrases in there, you will have people finding you. Recruiters and hiring managers use a specialized, then they pay a lot of money for it, version of LinkedIn where they can go in and put 7 to 10 keyword phrases, sometimes more than that. And if those keyword phrases pop up with you, you're a hit. And that's who a recruiter or hiring manager will reach out to. If your LinkedIn profile does not have enough keyword phrases or summary accomplishments, we don't put as many accomplishments in a LinkedIn profile as we do in your resume. If it doesn't have that, you miss. It's just that simple. There are over 800 million people right now with LinkedIn profiles. It's an incredibly powerful tool. Your first and second connections can generate, and we'll talk about this tomorrow night, can generate some additional networking opportunities. They can create doors opening, contacts that you just can't do otherwise. LinkedIn is a really valuable and powerful tool. I have to do a mea culpa on my LinkedIn profile. It only has 12 contacts because I just got out of LinkedIn jail about 4 or 5 weeks ago. I was in for 2 years for the following crime. You ready? I got COVID in March of 2023, and I posted a picture of me smiling, holding up a positive COVID test. 3 days later, the Thought Police pulled my profile down, 5,100 connections and all kinds of posts. And I just got it back under a new email, a new phone, and a new address and all this other kind of stuff a few weeks ago. So you have to be careful. But the penalty didn't fit the crime, at least not in my mind. So it's a powerful tool, and I've worked on it with many, many, many of my clients. Okay. So one of the pieces of homework tonight, and you can take a screenshot of this right now, is to define your accomplishments. And the way I want you to do it, you don't have to do all of them, but do 2 or 3 of them. That's a healthy amount. Is to, and I'll send this out, by the way, in the email tonight as well. Brief description of your accomplishment, the circumstances, the actions you took, and then the results. And I'll go back to that sales circumstance where the one of my clients grew a territory 3 consecutive years between 10 and 25%. Circumstances were this: the territory had been declining 10% a year for the prior 3 years. My client called on every old contact that he had access to, and he had a strategy for creating new business. It was in the human resources, staffing, and accounting related software. And by doing that, he was able to generate new business, and his results were what I was telling you about before, between 10 and 25%, 3 consecutive years. The other thing that I would like you to focus on is your ideal job description. And it goes back to that one paragraph that I had highlighted in blue. Type or field of work, location, compensation, work environment, the types of colleagues that you want to work with, and the mission or goals of a new organization. The more precise you can be about this, the better off your search will be.
Like a giant pieces. That would take months. They only make one to that movie.
Okay. Any questions, thoughts? I actually get a lot closer to the top of the hour than I thought I would. Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. I had already done this one. So this is a version of the CAR, that's circumstances, actions, results. How many of you have seen this before, or some version of this before? This is new. This is new to everybody. Okay. 2 reasons for doing this. Number 1 is to create resume bullet points. And number 2 is to create interview topics and descriptions of how you made a difference. I'll give you the interview response when somebody says, well, tell me how you grew that territory 24%. Well, when I got the position, it had been declining 10 to 20% a year for the last 3 years. I developed 125 new contacts, 35 of them became clients, and I followed up with a number of different clients that had been dormant. There were 75 of them who hadn't been contacted in 2 or 3 years. The results were, and it took me a few months to get this off the ground, but the results were I created a 24% increase in sales and a 45% increase in customer base. And Mr. or Ms. Interviewer, I can do the same for you. Okay. Is that landing? And Imani, I know this may be an exercise that you think is not applicable for you. I promise you it is. I just
No,
don't, I
actually,
don't know what.
No, I actually do think it is, especially like when it comes to the resume and I know LinkedIn a lot of the time it's like they have more experience and things to put on there, but just like I'm taking notes for future reference and also just how to set up my resume and make it
Mhm.
better. So yeah, it's actually is helpful.
Okay. And what I'm saying is a sales territory that you had responsibility for. That's what I mean. Like this one, this particular example may not be germane to you, but there are other accomplishments that you've had in different walks of life or in professional circumstances as well.
Right.
Okay. And that's what I'm going to be asking each of you to highlight. Okay. And two or three, but if you want to do more than that, you're going to get way ahead of the game. Okay.
Okay.
Now, just as a point of reference, I've spoken to about this, but this is the book that my colleague Henry Lesher and I wrote back. I don't know, we published it 4 years ago, and there's a workbook that goes along with it. And the workbook includes all of these things related to circumstances, actions, results, and there are a whole lot of other exercises, all the ones we've talked about so far in the workbook. And this is something, if you decide you want to avail yourself of it, or if you decide you want to work with me as a client, we'll use this as the roadmap. Okay, now, and if you want to connect with me on either Facebook or LinkedIn, feel free to do so. And I mentioned before that if you would like lifetime access to any of these recordings, the first two, obviously last night and tonight, copy of the book, and then a bonus call at the end of the week, just let me know and we can set that up for you as well.
Okay.
Any questions, thoughts, reactions? Are you in overwhelm or are you saying, okay, cool, I'm gonna nail this?
I'm saying
Figure out
okay.
how to
Great.
make it work for appraisals.
Okay, work for appraisals. Hold on to that thought, Dorothy. And Scott and Imani, you were saying, and I didn't catch it because like you're all talking at the same time. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
no, I thought it would be a great help in fine tuning my resume and my LinkedIn page. I know they both need work, so I'm looking forward to that.
Okay.
Right, same here. I feel like those the resume and the LinkedIn definitely was good tips today because I can also use some improvement and just knowing how to set it up and everything. So yeah, that was good.
Just as a point of reference, I've worked with about 645 clients in the last 12 years. And at various times that I used to do this, both for myself and for others, just on a volunteer basis, and when I was back in grad school, I've worked on over 1,000 resumes. And I've done multiple hundreds of presentations, bullet point format for senior executives and all this kind of stuff. And it's being able to tell your story in bullet point form so that the person on the other side of the desk of the Zoom call says, I have to hire this person. That is the only goal for a resume and a LinkedIn profile, is to get you the interview so that you can get hired.
Yeah, and also the what stood out in the beginning when you were saying like doing the inner work first, that was also a good tip for me because I think that is the only way to you really finding out what you
Right.
really want to do. So yeah, that was also something I really enjoyed.
Okay. Nicole DeReese.
Nothing off the top of my head. I think everyone else said, just I'm excited about the 16 personalities.
Okay.
It's just something I think it'd be interesting because I think that's my issue is I kind of need to find some like introspective.
Okay, great. And the other thing is, and this is going to sound self-serving, but it's not. It's intended to get you to the finish line sooner than you might on your own. Having another pair of eyes is kind of like a personal ad agency. And that's why ad agencies exist, is because companies and product managers and marketing managers are too close to their products and services, and they're not seeing it from a third party point of view. And that's the role I play. Okay, so as each of you is coming up with your unique aspects of your personality, your skill sets, your accomplishments, and everything that goes along with it, it's weaving all of that into a story that's going to be, again, clear, compelling, and concise for a hiring manager that you may not have met yet, likely haven't met yet. So tomorrow night, we're going to go into networking and outreach and being more effective and efficient on those. And looking forward to seeing what your homework looks like. And we'll do some sharing tomorrow as well. So maybe not as much as we did tonight, but we'll certainly have the opportunity to. Any other thoughts and questions before we sign off?
Nope.
Thank you again for your participation, and glad it's been of value. And we'll see you tomorrow, same bat time. For those of you who grew up around when I did, you know what that means. And
That
same,
cave, right?
that's right, same bat channel, same Zoom channel, and we'll go from there. Okay.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
All right.
Good night.
Thanks, Bill. Good night.
Take care.